them, and there's going to be some other things that we're going to talk about as well. But we're going to begin tonight in verse 32, and I'll just read down through verse 34 to set the text for this passage. The writer of Hebrews writes, "And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, and of Barak, and of Samson, and of Jephthah, and of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned aflight the armies of the aliens." Now we come back. Last week we talked about Israel's faith. We talked about Rahab and her faith. And now in verse 32, the writer picks up concerning some men. Now I assume that all of us know who Gideon was, correct? Anybody here who doesn't know who Gideon was? Okay. Gideon was a man that is known for his faith. He was an outstanding leader because of his great faith. Now, two things that I want to at least bring out in this. If you will, go back to the book of Judges, chapter 6. Judges, chapter 6. And in Judges, chapter 6, we find the call of Gideon. Let's go to verse 11, if you will. In Judges 6, it says, "There came an angel of the Lord and sat under an oak which was in Ophrah, that pertained to Joash the Abiezrite. And his son Gideon threshed wheat by the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. And Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen us?" Anybody ever ask that question? If God is so great and God is so good, why are we going through all these things that we're going through? And nobody's ever asked that, I'm sure, that's sitting here tonight. I'm sure we've always just, we've taken whatever comes in life without ever groaning about it or ever questioning God about it, right? Okay. At least you find it funny, so it tells me you've never really done that, okay? But at any rate, it says, "The Lord said, O my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen on us? And where be all his miracles, which our fathers told us of, saying, did not the Lord bring us up out from Egypt? But now the Lord hath forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites." By the way, is that a true statement? The Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hands, or delivered us into the hands of the Midianites. Is that a true statement? Okay, you say no?
First part would be no.
Okay. Anybody else got an opinion?
Won't you say that again?
Okay. Is this a true statement? Let me go back here. But now the Lord hath forsaken us. Is that a true statement?
Could be no, because if they see him.
Okay.
He said,
Yes, he delivered them into the hand of the...
Okay. I believe that it is a true statement in this sense. They had been in the land, they had been told what to do, they failed to do, they failed to perform what God told them to perform. God has, in one sense, not forsaken them, but at the same time, he has delivered them into the hands of the Midianites so that they can suffer the consequences for their failure to obey. Israel, in the time of the judges, was just like when they had the days of the kings. The difference being is a judge would come and rule over Israel and would do a good job and lead them back toward God, but then when that judge died off, nobody else was picked up the ball and ran with it. They just went back, every man to doing that which was right in his own eyes. And because of that, it's not any different than you and I. It is suffering the consequences for our failures as well, okay? So the answer, I guess, would be yes and no at the same time. God's hand was still with Israel. What was that? God's hand was still with Israel, because now God is calling a man out to judge Israel once again. His name is Gideon. Now, verse 14, the Lord looked upon him and said, Go in this thy might, and thou shalt save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have not I sent thee? And he said unto him, O my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is poor, Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. Now, Gideon was a man who makes it into the hall of faith. But again, when you read those words right there, does he sound like a man who has a great deal of faith? So we come back to this thing that it only takes a little faith to please God. God is pleased with faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please God, but with faith, it is possible to please God. And these men had a little bit of faith. When you stop and you think about it, after Gideon, and this always brings a question, I'll ask you about it and or what your thoughts are, because that's about all we're going to be able to accomplish with it anyway. But here is Gideon who throws out the fleece, okay? He wants to be sure that God has spoken to him. I've heard many say, well, he shouldn't have thrown out the fleece, that was wrong to throw out the fleece. I've heard some say, yes, it's a good thing. What say you?
Seems to be there's a little motive difference for some, for the reason they do it. You hear, God say that if you come just really searching, or if you come with a side motive, then it could be wrong.
Okay, anybody else?
It's never wrong to seek God for an answer. It's better than going to the world.
Okay. Anybody else have a different
If we're
opinion?
doing it to tempt him, I guess is what I've read. We're doing it to tempt him or test him to see
Right.
what really. But if we're doing it for the right reason.
You know something? I think, personally, oftentimes we would be better off if we did, in one sense, throw out a fleece to know that it is God who's speaking to us and not somebody else, right?
Yes.
I don't have a problem with what he did, because at least by so doing, he was making sure that this angel of the Lord was that angel of the Lord. It was not someone else. It wasn't somebody else. So I think you're right. I think this is, there's nothing wrong with
Do you
this.
think that's any different than when we say to God, if this isn't your will, close the door? Wouldn't that be almost like the same thing?
It's about the same thing. You're exactly right. And Gideon demonstrated his faith. What was the thing that Gideon did that most of us would have been really hesitant to do that actually demonstrated his faith? Do you remember? Well, let me give you a little bit of a hint. He started out with an army of 32,000 men, okay? Now, where did it go from there?
300.
Down from 32,000 to 300. Now, you got to ask yourself, was there more than 300 Midianites out there that he was fighting? Okay? But the thing that you find later on is the fleece has been put out. He's been assured that it is God who is in this, that God is in it. And now he is willing to go to battle with 300 men. And as far as I can remember in this story, and I must admit I did not read it all to refresh my mind, but I don't recall him complaining about only having 300 men. He was willing to go with what God gave him. How many of us are willing to go with what God gives us? Okay? So Gideon, he was a man who was willing to go to battle against the army of the Midianites with only 300 men, and without any question, once the army was cut down, he was satisfied to follow God. Now we have another man that's mentioned here. We used to call him Barak, and then Barack Obama became president, and his name changed, okay? And by the way, if you do look up his name in the pronunciation of it, it is Barack, okay? So Barack is the correct pronunciation. But he was always Barak until that happened, okay? Nobody questioned Barak until, Obama showed up on the scene. So maybe he did us a favor at least in one thing, all right, if nothing else. All right, now with that said, who was Barak? Let me give you a hint. He was not a judge. However, he was on the scene at the time of the judges. Who was the judge when Barak was on the scene? I know y'all know this, okay? You're just letting your mind
That's the
slip.
one that the donkey talked to him.
No, that was Balaam.
Balaam, that's who I'm thinking of. Okay.
Okay? Barak was on the scene when Deborah was the judge. Okay? Israel had one woman judge. And Barak, you might even question his, if you go back to Judges chapter 4, he felt incapable. And I don't know if I didn't write down the verses, so let's...
I think it's 5. Judges 4:5?
That could be it. I forgot to write them down. Yeah, we can go back here, yes. In fact, we can go back to get the picture here. We'll go back to verse 4. And in verse 4, Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lepidith, she judged Israel at that time, and she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim, and the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she sent and called Barak, the son of Abinadab, out of Kadesh Naphtali, and said unto him, Hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and of the children of Zebulun. And I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. And now, verse 8, here is a mighty man of valor, okay? And Barak said unto her, If thou wilt go with me, then I will go, but if thou wilt not go with me, then I'm not going to go either. I paraphrased that last section, or that last statement.
He's a military leader.
He's a military leader, but he wanted Deborah to go with him. In fact, he demanded that Deborah go with him.
Well,
And we see in that, we see a man that is filled with fear, even though he felt incapable. That is, he insisted that Deborah go with him. God still gave the victory. When God calls someone to do something, he will also equip them, and many times they will go forth in fear, okay? But at the same time, if they will take that step of faith, God honors faith. And that's why Barak finds himself listed here. You're laughing. What's that?
No, I'm just laughing because he trusted in human strength and not God.
In one sense, you're right, he trusted, and probably the one who was least capable. I'm sure that Deborah was not trained as a soldier, okay? But he may have felt this, and I'm going to give him a little bit of out here, okay? I'm going to sympathize with him just a little bit.
That's a man thing.
Suppose if you think of it from this point of view, that he sensed that God was with Deborah, and it was in essence like taking God to battle with him, okay? Her presence. When Israel, what did Israel take with them whenever they went into battle? The Ark of the Covenant. Why did they take the Ark of the Covenant?
God's presence.
For God's presence to be there, okay? So I'm going to cut him a little bit of slack, knowing that, hey, she was the judge that God had chosen for Israel at that time, and he felt like, hey, if God is with her, he'll be with me, all right?
Here come the judge.
Court's in session, right? Okay, so now we have Gideon, we have Barak. He believed God. He attacked Sisera's massive army with only 10,000 men, simply because he had confidence that God was in it. Then we come across a man that all of us know, okay? Anybody here do not know Samson? Now, wait a minute. We laugh. Yeah. We laugh, but at the same time, did Samson, or would you consider from what you read about Samson, that here is Samson, a man of faith?
Absolutely.
Okay? Explain.
Explain.
Yeah.
Because even though he did wrong, he still had faith in God at the end. He wouldn't have collapsed those things. He did that for the
Okay.
Lord.
All right.
Because he knew he was taking his life, and he was trying to, I think he was trying to make right at the end.
All right. Is there any other reason that you might say he was a man of faith?
Everything he endured, you know, he had the faith that God would see him through. Because I don't think
Okay.
he would have the strength to do what he did and to make it through those things if he didn't have the faith.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just take a couple of illustrations. And if you would have to go back. We won't take the time to turn back there on him. But do we remember how he slew 1,000 Philistines single-handedly? How did he do that?
The jawbone.
With the jawbone of an ass. He slew 1,000 Philistines by himself, with nobody's help. Without faith, he would have never been able to accomplish that. I mean, it took faith to pick the jawbone up and start, swinging it, okay? Then also, do we not recall that he also, on one occasion, do you remember he took the gates I believe it was it Gaza that he took the gates of, and he moved them up, he carried them up a hill to ward off, I guess, or I can't remember all the details about it, but there were incidences through Samson's life that illustrated that he was, even though if we were writing this, we probably wouldn't include Samson, okay? We would have remembered, and this is one of the things that I've always said, a man can serve God faithfully all of his life. And at the end of his life, he can mess up one time, and what do people remember? All of the years of what he done faithfully seem to get lost in the one mistake. And I can think of an individual right now who very well may have, I don't know, his personal life beyond one incident, but they gave every incident that he was serving God faithfully, he messed up, and then he got his life straightened out again by all outward appearance, and he went on and served God faithfully after that. But you know what you think of when you hear his name?
What he did in the
Yeah.
behind him.
In fact, he was probably one of the best Bible teachers that you could sit under. I mean, he could explain the Bible that he could make a little child understand, okay? I mean, you remembered it. But unfortunately, now when you see him or you see his name, you know, your mind automatically goes to that one time when he messed up. And how sad that is, but that's the way we view Samson. In fact, here's what Matthew Henry said about him. He said, true faith is acknowledged and accepted, even when mingled with many failings. You know? And so God honors faith. If we don't get anything else, you know, we look at all of this, and how many times have we heard this story, the sermons from Hebrews chapter 11? But if we understand, if we don't get anything else from what we are looking at here, we're looking at human beings who have failings just like we do. And the one thing that we should walk away from here with is that, hey, you know what? God took their bits of faith and he counted it as great accomplishments because of those little. And the way I see it, and you may see it differently, but as I look at this, what I'm coming up with is that God doesn't think nearly as much of their failings. He mentions them. He tells the whole story. But instead of being focused on their failures, his heart is focused on their faith. And I think if God does not change, it may be that that's what he's focused on with us. All right, now, how many of you know anything about Jephthah?
Looking at it, so I know, he's a judge, right?
Yes, he is. Jephthah is a man. Let's go back to Judges 11. Okay? And by the way, I'm taking time with these purposely because I want us to know and understand that we don't have to be, superstars in order for God to use us. In fact, most of the people that you'll find that God used were not superstars, okay? I'm not sure that in their particular day that they were even considered heroes, okay? Many of them probably didn't leave a great taste in a lot of people's mouth, okay? But if you go back to chapter 11 of Judges, and actually the whole story is covered through chapter 12 and verse 7, but I want to focus here. Let me read a few verses here from chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. It says, Now Jephthah, the Gileadite, was a mighty man of valor, and he was the son of an harlot, and Gilead begat Japheth. Okay, now let me ask you a question. What's the one chalk already against him?
He was the son of a harlot.
Son of a harlot. Okay, he didn't have a great beginning, did he? All right, but let's go on. And Gilead's wife bare him sons, and his wife's sons grew up, and they thrust out Jephthah, and said unto him, Thou shalt not inherit in our father's house, for thou art the son of a strange woman. Okay? Strike two. Not accepted by his brothers. Okay? His brothers didn't like him. They looked at him and thought, well, he's a second-class citizen or third-class citizen because of the way his life started. And here is a man, and one of the things you have to remember, how many of you have control over the way your life starts? We're absolutely helpless, are we not, when it comes to that? We didn't have anything to do with it. And it's not how we start that makes the difference. It's how we finish that is the big deal. And it goes on, verse 3, Then Jephthah fled from his brethren and dwelt in the land of Tob. There were gathered vain men to Jephthah and went out with him. And it came to pass in process of time that the children of Ammon made war against Israel. And it was so that when the children of Ammon made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to fetch Jephthah out of the land of Tob. And they said unto Jephthah, Come, be our captain, that we may fight with the children of Ammon. Now that seems like a strange request when you kick him out. Oh, but now he can help us. Let's go get him to come back and help us. Now Jephthah did, by the way, what most would do in that case. In verse 7, Jephthah said unto the elders of Gilead, Did not ye hate me and expel me out of my father's house? And why are ye come unto me now when ye are in distress? Why do you want my help? You know, who am I that I should have to help you? And do we not feel like that when somebody crosses us, somebody does wrong, and then all of a sudden, you know, they have to eat humble pie and come, and we may be the only help that they can find and can muster up, and do we feel like helping them when they do that? Truth of the matter is, no, we really don't want to. But here's a man who he was familiar with rejection. His mother was a harlot. He was taken and raised by his father, but after apparent abuse by his family and neighbors during his childhood, he was driven from home into the desert in exile. Now you think about that. Here's a guy who has every reason to be bitter. Here's a guy who has every reason to be angry. But he also does something else in verse 9. And Jephthah said unto the elders of Gilead, If you bring me home again to fight against the children of Ammon, and the Lord deliver them before me, shall I be your head? In other words, I'll come, but this is my condition, okay? I'm going to be the next judge. I'm going to be the one who runs the place, okay? And you're going to have to listen to what I tell you. And Jephthah then sought God's help in verses 30, 31. If you look at verse 30 and 31, in fact, in verse 30 and 31, boy, he makes a foolish vow. Jephthah vowed a vow unto the Lord and said, If thou shalt without fail deliver the children of Ammon into mine hand, then it shall be that whatsoever cometh forth of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the children of Ammon shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. Whoa. Sounds not a problem so far, right? Until he gets home. And after he gets home, verse 35, it came to pass when he saw her. By the way, I guess we need to go back to verse 34. Jephthah came to Mizpah into his house, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with timbrels and with dances, and she was his only child. Beside her he had neither son nor daughter. And it came to pass when he saw her,